I'd like to call the Truth in Taxation hearing to order at 6 p.m. on December 1st, 2022 at the district office. I'd like to let the audience know that if you would like to make comments tonight, we're going to green card this, so there are green cards located on the table over there. If you could fill out a green card if you want to comment after Director Renberg's presentation, fill out a card and give that card to us, and then you can make your comments after that. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Director Renberg to do her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kettle. Thank you, and welcome tonight to the taxation hearing. I'm Ms. Robert Heidi. I'm the Director of Business Services here at Forest Lake Area Schools. Minnesota law requires that we host this meeting tonight. So Truth in Taxation, a public meeting, it has to be held between November 25th and December 28th each year. Start at 6 p.m. or later. It may be part of a regularly scheduled board meeting, so right before tonight. Must allow for public comments as part of this session, and may adopt the final levy at the same meeting. So you will see that that is on the agenda for tonight's board meeting. At the presentation, we are going to include information on our current year budget and also the proposed tax levy. And so those are the requirements set forth in the statute. Our agenda tonight, we're going to spend some time on background information on school funding. We're going to look at the district's budget. We're going to look at the district's proposed tax levy, payable 23, and then we'll have time for public comments at the end. Again, the green cards are available if you would like.
Director?
Yes.
I'm sorry. It was my mistake, but we should take roll call. We
Oh,
need to have
sorry.
roll call. So if you don't mind pausing for just a second.
Of course.
Let's take roll call.
Member Corcoran? Here. Member Kettle?
Here.
Member Landstrom?
Here.
Member Rayfield?
Here.
Member Tyson is here. Member Peterson is absent. And Member Luther here.
Thank you.
So talking about public school funding, the Constitution states that the legislature shall make provisions for taxation or otherwise to support the public school system. And so that's what brings us here tonight. As a result of that, the funding in school, funding for schools is highly regulated. So the formulas which determine the revenue, most of which are based on the specific amounts per pupil, and then the tax policies for local schools are done at the state level. The maximum authority for the property tax levy is also done. So levies can be less than the maximum allowed, but they cannot be more unless it's approved by the voters in November. So again, that's a requirement. The state also authorizes the school board to submit the referendums for operating and capital needs for voter approval. So right now we're in the middle of our 8-year operating referendum. So we do already have that in place and was not part of this year. The basic public education formula lags inflation. So when we talk about what we use for our property taxes and that need for that operating referendum, this is a 20-year look back. You will see that there's other look backs that are longer periods of time, which see an increased figure than what's on this slide. But our 20-year look back says that, as I said, it has not kept pace with inflation. In the 21-22 school year, there was an increase of 2.45% on the general education revenue formula, and that was $161 over the previous year per pupil. And then in 22-23, we saw a 2% increase, which was $135 over the previous year. So again, for the 22-23 school year, that ended up being $6,863. And if we were to have kept up with inflation, we would have needed an additional $1,263 to have kept pace with that. And the total that we would have needed was $8,126. So visually, we see in the graph that, again, in the last 20 years, the orange line up there is where the state funding has brought us, and the blue line is where it would be based on inflation. So we see that gap. And we see it was pretty steady for a while, and over the last couple of years, we've seen that grow. Another area when we look at state funding for schools is special education and the underfunding in special education. So according to the Department of Education, in 2020, the cost of underfunding statewide was $591 million. By 2025, they anticipate that to be about $806 million. in underfunding for special education. The options that we have for that, in Forest Lake here, it's about $6.5 million of cross-subsidy, it's called. And so what we have to do is take that out of our general fund revenue that we get. And so looking at that, we can, cut in other programs to get that, or also increase referendum, or have a referendum, which again, we're in the middle of our 8 years. When I say that, here's a slide that just shows some comparable districts for who's around us. So looking at that, we see those voter-approved levies that we talked about. This includes all of our levies, so our debt, our capital projects, and our operating referendum per pupil allowance. So you can see that we're in the middle of that, and so between our comparable districts and our geographic area, we have $2,157 in voter approved. When we look strictly at our operating referendum, so this is a part, it does exclude what's called a local optional revenue, which is the part that the board puts into the referendum. And so with that, we see that we have a $987 per pupil operating referendum. And again, we're kind of moving down in the pack for where we were from the middle in this area. So moving on to the more tax specific, one of the things that we want to make sure when we look at taxes is not every change in the tax levy changes what is allocated to schools or changes the budget. So many of the tax levy formulas are based on state-determined formulas plus voter-approved referendums. So some increases are revenue neutral because they're offset by decreases in state funding. So an example of that would be our teacher QComp program. So for professional development, at times they've taken less, given us less state revenue, and we had to increase our levy in order to make up what we needed for that total program. And so again, they're able to do that through the legislature. Again, the expenditure budget is limited by the state set revenue formulas and voter approved. So they're going to tell us what we're able to levy for. And again, as I said at the beginning, the increase in taxes does not always correlate with the increase in the budget. When we look at the different levy cycles, so this year, what I'm presenting on tonight will actually be provided to us in the 23-24 school year. So school districts work on a July through June fiscal year versus our county and cities, which are the people who collect those taxes, work on the January through December fiscal year. So again, difference in cycles. So the money that we're talking about tonight will provide in 23-24, and that budget will be approved in June of 23. So we're going to dig a little bit into the district budget information now. So when we look at an overall school district budget, we have many different funds that we go from. So we see the little jars here. So we have our general fund, we have our food service fund, our community service, our building construction, our debt service, internal service, which we're self-insured, which is what that means. Our OPEB, the bottom two. So we were able a couple of years ago to look at post-retirement benefits and put those into some bonds, and that's what that involves. Overall, we're going to get into more detail because I know that we have our budget up here from the actual FY 21-22 and then our proposed 22-23 budget. There's going to be slides that follow that dig more into each one of these areas. But overall, we can see that we do have around for our 22-23 budget, we have overall $81,500,000 in expenditures that we see throughout our general fund, adding our food service, community service, building and debt service, OPEB, all those, we get up to that 101 number for our expenditure area and our 105 for the revenue area. So again, we'll dig into a little bit more of that right now. So again, looking at that 105,000 in revenue, we look at what percentage makes up each part of that. The general fund is the biggest part of that. at the almost 77%. And then we go down to our our construction right now, community service, food service, debt service, and then our OPEB. So again, looking at the pie, that general fund truly is the biggest part of that. When we look at where that money comes from, so what sources we have. So overall, the state, we talked about the inflation and keeping up on the general education formula. And so overall, the state sources are going to be the highest. The part that we're here tonight about, that blue slice, is the local. So that's going to be your property taxes. We do also get federal funds, and then we do also have others. So in the other category is going to be if we get grants, if we get admissions into all of our games or participation fees, things like that go into that area. Overall, when we look at the expenditure side, again, I mentioned we were at $81,250,000. So that will be mostly in salary and wages and benefits. So when I look at that pie, I always draw the attention to the blue and the orange. We're in the people business. And so that is what drives our expenditures. And so very visual to see both of those two components making up the majority. We do also, of course, need supplies, capital expenditures, and our debt service fund, and then, of course, other areas that we have. Moving on from school budgets onto the actual property tax information. So we're going to go over 4 areas in this area: the determination of the levy. We'll look at the comparison levy for 22-23. We'll also talk about reasons for changes, what changed on that statement, and then impact on taxpayers. Our property tax background: every owner of a taxable property pays the taxes on their jurisdiction in which their property is located. So in our district, we encompass 3 counties. So we have Chisago, Anoka, and Washington. We also have the cities, right? And so within that are many cities that make up those areas. So you're going to be paying in school taxes. So on your tax statement, you're going to see those different areas laid out in which areas the taxes are going to go to. So again, if you look at your statement, you're going to be able to see that. Each taxing jurisdiction is going to set its own tax levy based on the limits in state law. So just like the school district receives the information from the state of what we can levy, so does the cities and the counties. The county sends out the bills, the county collects the taxes from property owners, and then they're going to distribute them to the cities and the school district. So it's on the county's back to do that. This is a sample of the tax notification that I've seen a couple tonight already in hand. And so on that, what it's going to talk about is the proposed taxes compared to last year. As I stated, you're going to be able to see that by taxing jurisdiction. So again, the city, the county, the school district, if there's any special taxations that are happening. And then we're also going to be able, the voter approved and the other school district are going to be divided out on that sheet for you. The time and the place of the public meeting is also listed on there. As on the second page is the phone number. So on the second page went over the budget information that I just went over. And on the top of that was the phone number to be able to call with any questions that taxpayers have about that information that was provided to them. Each school district, so when we get down to the level of how we're setting our levy, each school district may levy taxes in over 40 different categories. So it is about 37 pages worth of calculations that come up with the amounts that we're going to levy in all these different categories. Again, the maximum levy amounts are calculated by the Department of Education. They're going to send us a report to let us know what is available for that levy per block. And again, state law dictates that along with voter approval. So property tax process, again, we're going to go through a couple of these on the next slides. And so we'll look at the next, go on to the 6-step process for that. So again, when we start, we talked about the fact that The county is going to determine the market value for each parcel in their county. The legislature is going to set the formulas in step 2. Step 3, the county auditor is going to calculate what that tax capacity is for each parcel located within their area, as well as the total tax capacity for the school district taxes. As I said before, the Minnesota Department of Education gives us that 37-page document with all those calculations, letting us know. Step 5, the school board gets involved. So the school board is going to see the proposed levy, which they did in September, and they're going to now, after the public meeting that's held, this meeting, Truth in Taxation, they're going to adopt the final levy in December. So the final levy cannot be more than the proposed levy, except for amounts that were voted on by the voters. And so what that means is, at the beginning, we did certify the maximum in September, and so tonight we'll be certifying the actual amount. There's many adjustments that happen throughout that time period between September and now, and you don't want to miss out on any of the adjustments that the Department of Ed has coming your way. So we want to make sure that we're able to do that. So again, tonight we'll be certifying that actual amount that is available to us. The county auditor, after that certification happens, divides the levy by the district's total tax capacity and then determines what it is needed to be able to do that. I went over this timeline. Again, MB prepared it. The school board looks at what is the proposed amounts. You get the property tax statements. And then December 1st, we're holding the hearing, and then we're going to approve. So again, the process of the taxes. After the option for public comment to it. Overall, digging into the actual tax information for specifically to the district, our payable 23 tax levy from payable 22 did have an increase of about $2.2 million and a 7.7% increase. With the overall tax base increases with property values, what that means is if you had the same property value, your taxes actually would have gone down because of the tax base increase. And we'll be able to see that in a couple of slides. Changes in the levy categories and reasons for these differences and the increase, we're going to go over right now. This is the information we talked about, those 40 categories that I mentioned earlier. This is a breakdown of just they're combined somewhat so that it can fit on a page. But again, looking at each area, our general fund ends up with about $19 million. Our community education fund ends up with just under 1.5, and then our debt service ends up with almost 11. And so that, again, takes all those 40 categories and gets them into the categories with our funds.
So some of those funds are tied, so when we levy those amounts, we also get matching amounts from the state based on that levy, is that correct?
Correct, yes. So a lot of times if we choose that we would decrease a levy, we would also see a decrease in the state funding side of things. So it's a double hit if we choose to do that. Yep. So getting into the explanation of changes, why did that increase? So again, the general fund mostly was due to prior year adjustments. So we saw about a $1.3 million increase in that. We did have long-term facilities maintenance, and that is just the upkeep of our building. We did a couple bigger projects that we were able to get adjustments for in the past. And so that is the main part of that. There were also other various uses. We have our career and tech levy. We have, again, our QCOMP, and then other areas really saw a minor adjustment, but the main part was the long-term facilities maintenance. Again, the initial levies are based on estimates, and in years later, I talked about this being for the 23-24 school year. So the adjustments that we're seeing when we say prior year, it was from last year and this year, and then we're going to get them in the future. future. So we do want to make sure that we recoup all of the funds that are available when we see those adjustments come through, because they've been part of our operation. So making a new levy is really important to recoup the revenue that goes along with that. The other area that we saw was the debt service area. And so again, we saw about a $400,000 increase in that area. And overall, the explanation here, when we do debt collections, we're required to levy for 105% of those payments that we have to do. And that's just to make sure that we're able to collect, because there are some delinquencies that happen on taxes. So we want to make sure that we collect enough to be able to pay for those bonds. We did 2015 bonds. We've also done some others. And so in order to pay for them, we collect at 105%. We retained that amount for this year to be able to look at our debt service and make sure we're able to make those payments. And so that was the increase in this year's. So on the property tax statement, as I said a couple slides ago, really there's a lot that goes into what that might be. I said overall we're going to see, and I'll show in a minute, that if your value stayed the same, you would see a decrease in taxes. And so here are some things that might change that. So there's changes in individual property values. There's changes in the total value of all the properties within the district. And also increases and decreases in the levies amount because of state funding, which we were just talking about. If they change the formula, we have to change the formula so that we can keep it even. There's also local needs and costs. Again, everything has to be approved by the legislature or voters in order for us to levy for it. And then referendums and other factors. So we're going to dig into the numbers for individual property here. And so what we're going to look at is a 4-year school levy comparison. So examples include the school district taxes. We're going to see a no change version, and then we're also going to see a version that has the 26.1% increase in property values over the past 4 years. So again, actual changes in value may be more or less for any particular property. That again is determined by the county, not the school district. And so you will see that again, any parcel might have different changes in their value. And then also is a fair representation of what it would look like for the typical property in the city of Forest Lake. So again, I talked about the fact that we have multiple counties, multiple cities, but again, the samples we are using tonight is for the city of Forest Lake. And the amounts, again, are going to be showing are the preliminary. They ended up being the final amounts. We did really well this year on being accurate right away with our numbers. So we will see what is up there. And then, again, just to let you know, the estimates were provided by our municipal financial advisors. So this is the first slide saying that if there was based on no property tax value changes, so if my house was valued at $500,000, you can see the taxes payable in 2020, 2021, 2022, 23. Overall, between 20 and 23, you're going to see that you would have seen, if your property value stayed the same, you would have seen a $371 reduction to your taxes in that time.
On the school side tax.
Correct. Yep. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. So yes, and this again is solely based, we talked about those categories, city, county, school. This is solely based in the school tax area. So again, for that 4-year period, you would have seen that negative 371. For the 1-year period, you would have seen 237. So again, values staying exactly the same, you would have seen a negative on your taxes. So just showing graphically, again, you would be able to see on a left side, $250,000 home. We see that went down 1,024, down on 23 to 843. On the right, a $500,000 home, the school taxes would have gone from 2,122 to 1,751. commercial properties, so this is where we saw even a bigger decrease percentage-wise. So again, commercial industrial property for school taxes, if you had $500,000 worth of commercial industrial property, you would have had that 2,306 back in 2020. You would have been at 1,925 in 2023. Again, $3 million commercial and industrial property, you would have gone from 14,419 down to 12,007. Looking at the cumulative changes, so talking about that tax base changing, if we looked at a 26% change in property value over those same 4-year period, that is where, again, you would see that you would go from a house back in 2020 that was valued at 198 or about $200,000, you would have seen those taxes being $793. Now, that same house would be $250,000 with a change in value, and that would be $843. So again, the change in value is driving what that amount is that you would pay. Same thing, yeah.
Can I just get a clarification? One thing that we levy for an amount of money, so if all values in the district go up,
Yep.
we get that same amount of money. If they all go down, we get the same amount of money. If some go up, some go down, we get the same amount of money. And so that a taxpayer paying more because their house went up in value means that other taxpayers are paying a little less because we always get the same amount of money. Is that correct?
That is a very accurate
Okay.
statement, yes. So as we saw on the slide with the negatives, and then here, the $500,000 house, again, looking at the slide, was a $400,000 house in 2020 and became a $500,000 house in 2023. So again, that change in value, you have some people that are negatives and you have some people that are positive because we're getting to that main amount.
So if you add an addition to your house, your neighbors should come over and thank you.
So it's really important, especially this year, to talk about the fact that there are state and property tax refunds and deferral programs that are available to taxpayers. And so if you feel that you are unable to pay any of part of your property taxes, there's 3 programs that are available, and we want to make sure that everyone knows about them. There's a homestead credit refund, and that's available to all homestead property, residential and agriculture. So house, garage, 1 acre, 1 acre AGA only, but the refund is a sliding scale based on the total property taxes and the income. The maximum refund for homeowners is the $2,930 and then $2,280 for renters. But again, it's called the homestead credit refund. The next one is called the special property tax refund. That's available also to all homestead property, both residential, agriculture, and then this with the gross tax increase of at least 12%. And over $100 over the prior year. So this one gets into a bracket that if you fall into that, you would be able to apply for this. The refund is 60% of the tax increase that exceeds the greater than 12%. And it does have a maximum of $1,000. So another program that if you fall into that category, you could look to apply for some relief. The last one is the senior citizen property tax deferral. So this allows people that are 65 and older with a household income of $60,000 or less to defer that portion of the property taxes on their home. So deferred property taxes because interest must be paid when the homeowner sells or dies. So those are the 3 programs that are available to the public if they would need assistance with their property taxes. Next step, we're going to go ahead and open the board will open up to public comment, and then again, we will need to certify the levy in order to get that out to the Department of Education.
We have a 3-minute comment,
Yes.
and our clerk is responsible for timing that.
And we would prefer, if you can, based just on the number of people we have in the audience, if you could sign a green card for us, we appreciate that. The green cards are located on the table there.
I make one. Oh, also say that we are also available at any time. As I said, the phone number was also listed, but if you have any questions, I'm available at any time.
You had the example up on the screen, but I live in Forest Lake, so I actually brought my statement with me, and what she's referring to is the phone number, and the information you want to see is on the second page, and the phone number is right there. Who do you want to call? We'll hold everything open for at least 5 minutes. So we have some time to think. If you want to make a comment, as I said, just give us a green card. Feel free to make a comment or question. Flash the lights, but I can't reach the switch. We're going to make it last call if anybody would like to make a comment or a question. Having no one step forward, I think at this point we'll close public comment.
Comment, discussion with the board, and then
Comments and questions?
Well, I just wanted to thank Director Medford.
That's on.
I can't now, it's broken. I just wanted to thank Director Medford. He did such a great, very thorough explanation and very, like 101 property tax, which I know is not an easy thing. So I appreciate it because it was easy to follow and well understood, and I appreciate all of your hard work. So thank you.
Director Redberg, I just have one question and clarification. Where I live, I get asked where we're kind of an anomaly. We have we have 2 charters and a private school in our boundary. And I have always asked, where does that show on the statement? And I know you had it up there, and I know that they don't have truth and taxation hearings, but if they do build new buildings, that is on there and does show, right?
So it actually goes through the Department of Education. Their bond funding goes through the Department of Ed, and so it goes through the legislature, and it's not part of property taxes. So it's through the legislative state-funded side.
Thank you for that, because that's typically my reply, but I always want to make sure
Yep,
that it's separate.
yep, it is separate.
Thank you, and great job tonight, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? I'd also like to thank Director Benson for a fine job. Thank you.
Yes.
At this point, we will close. We'll close the truth and taxation hearing. Thank you. Motion to adjourn. We have a motion. We have a motion. We have a second. Any questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The hearing is closed.